I'm excited about this one. I'm going to show you the one purchase that I made for my system that improved my sound by at least 50%. And I am not kidding. So your record is clean and you've used your record brush and your anti-static gun, to make sure that everything is perfect before dropping the stylus. But there is one thing that can ruin your playback at any point in the entire process: vibrations. And I'm going to show you how I stopped them because they were a problem with my system. As I've said this many times before, and even recently on some recent videos, vibrations are the enemy when it comes to your playback. And vibrations can be introduced in all kinds of ways. It can be from just the internal motor of your turntable. Some components of your system can introduce vibrations, which I'm going to get to. And also something as simple as your furnace kicking on the floor below. That introduces subtle changes to the environment, as would a giant lizard that happens to be stomping through your city. The electrical signals that are converted into sound all begin with the vibrations at your stylus, and it sends them back. It does not filter out vibrations that are bad. It has no idea. For your stylus, as far as your stylus is concerned, all vibrations are treated equally. And we could learn a lot from that. Sometimes these vibrations are very imperceptible. Other times, depending on the strength, they're amplified and then they are played back through your speakers. The most common effect is an increase in distortion. The sound can sound a little muddied or come across as muddied. You might lose some clarity, you might lose detail, and in severe cases, the vibrations can cause the needle to skip, which is bad for your stylus and also bad for your record. And I've had this issue for months, and it presented itself in two ways. One was an obvious way, and another a not so obvious. I'm going to start with the obvious one first. The not so obvious is a little weird. My turntable has a floating suspension system which separates the platter from the plinth, and I've talked about this before, so I won't get too deeply into it. But the reason for that suspension system is to remove or prevent vibrations from the internal workings of my turntable from reaching the stylus. But I had another problem. The obvious problem was my floor in my listening room is a floating floor. It's a laminate floor that's floating. And it picks up any vibrations, especially if you're walking across the room. Now, my Thorns has always sat on top of a very heavy cabinet that's filled with records, filled with, I would say, maybe half of my collection. It's a heavy, like I said, a heavy cabinet, so you wouldn't think it would pick up vibrations, but it does, especially because it sits on that floating floor. So if you walk close to the cabinet or walk heavily across the room, that needle would skip. It was a real pain in the ass, to be honest. So you had to gingerly walk across the room so you would not affect playback. And when I was going through the utter insanity of tweaking my speakers, moving them back and forth or a little bit closer or further from the wall, anytime I moved the speaker, I would jiggle the cabinet and also jiggle the stylus. So I had to make sure I paused the music before doing any of these tweaks. I went through hell. So that's the obvious vibrations that I had to deal with. Now on to the not so obvious vibrations and how I found out about them. So to combat the problem I was facing with the obvious vibrations of having the turntable on the cabinet, I had this genius thought. Not really a genius thought. I mean, this solution's been around for a while, but I had this genius thought of, why not decouple the turntable from the cabinet and thus the floor? So that's exactly what I did. You can see here my Thorns is no longer sitting on the cabinet. Instead, it's on a shelf that extends over the cabinet by a couple of inches. The shelf is a genius product made by Pangea Audio, and the platform itself is separated by the base using 4 adjustable spikes. I've also removed the feet on my Thorns and placed it on 4 damping feet from Sound Deck, which is a company based out of the UK. And I purchased those damping feet maybe a month or so ago, also to help with vibrations. I didn't notice a big difference. But what I love about the Pangea turntable shelf are these spikes. So they serve to further minimize contact and vibrations. And because they are adjustable, I'm able to perfectly level the turntable. The feet I removed allowed for this, but since I removed them, the spikes step in to do the job of adjusting. So now I have a turntable that's completely separated from the floor and footfalls. I'd have to bang on the wall to cause a vibration to it. So I figured I'm all set. It's as isolated as it's going to get, unless somebody comes up with anti-gravity pucks and separates it from the entire house. So if you're listening Pangea Audio, there's your next product, and I'll be your first customer. But this is where things get really strange. Once I had removed my turntable from the cabinet and placed it on the wall, I noticed something that I didn't expect. My soundstage widened. At first I thought it had to be the record. This was right after Christmas, and one of my Christmas presents was Pink Floyd's The Animals, the 2018 remix, which is known for having great sound and a great soundstage. So I attributed it. I figured that had to do with it. But anyway, the next record I put on was Ozzy Osbourne's Bark at the Moon, which isn't known for having a big soundstage, but it does have good sound. But man, it had good sound when I played it on the Thorns sitting on that wall shelf. I could hear the instruments better, and the bass response was way better than I remembered it being. And I've experienced the same thing with every single record I've listened to since Christmas. There were even some records that I would actually break down and use tone controls on to increase the bass. I don't have to do that anymore. I didn't change anything else except for one thing, the addition of that shelf to fight against a vibrating floor. I didn't tweak speakers. I didn't do anything of the sort. I'm hoping those insane days are long behind me. Now, could it really be the shelf? It has to be, and here's why I think that is. I've removed it from all vibrations, even the subtle ones. I've removed it from the obvious ones that we have already discussed, but then there are the subtle ones that I didn't even realize were there. Now, I get a really decent bass response from my tube amp, the Galleon TS120 Standard Edition. It's not a huge bass response, but I don't listen to high decibels either, but I can actually feel the bass through my chair. So, I mean, that's good. It's a good bass response. But my KLH Model 5 speakers sit on a metal stand. The bass coming from my speakers, which sits on that metal base, send tiny vibrations through the room. Stay with me, I told you this was weird. Given how sensitive my cabinet and turntable was to vibrations, it makes sense that those sound vibrations reached the stylus. Now, how could it not? And the stylus is the most sensitive instrument in your entire system. It picked up those subtle bass vibrations that were coming from the speakers, and every time it did, it would affect the movement of the stylus. So it was actually probably jumping right up and down in that groove with every time the bass vibration reached it. So in a sense, it was reducing the bass while being affected by it, and also muddying the sound. By decoupling the entire thing from that cabinet, I allowed the stylus to track undisturbed. And as a result, the sound is incredible. And I feel like I'm listening to a whole new system. And it's all because of this one purchase of the Pangea Audio wall shelf. It's all about isolation, and that's going to be my mantra from now on. If you're a vinyl enthusiast as I am, isolation is everything. Removing vibrations or reducing vibrations as much as possible from reaching your turntable, whatever that solution may be. For me, it's this wall shelf. But whatever solution you have, I'm telling you, it is going to improve clarity, it's going to improve detail, and it's going to improve bass response. For me, this shelf is worth every penny. It's paid for itself in the first month that I've owned it. It's an investment I was more than happy to make. So I want to hear from you too. Have you had any vibration issues? And if so, how did you solve them? Was it a do-it-yourself hack, or did you buy a product? Do you have a wall shelf yourself? And if you did you notice the same things that I just explained? Did it improve your sound? I'd love to hear from you, and I'm sure others would love to hear that as well, and to hear what your experience has been. So, leave comments down below, and don't forget to click like and subscribe and all those things. But most of all, I really want to thank you for being here and taking the time to listen to all of this. I really appreciate it. So, until next time, please take care of yourself and enjoy your records.